Hello everyone, my name is Kaden King and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, I tell interesting or scary stories that I found online. If you do like what we do here, please subscribe, do share with your friends, and even like the videos as they come out. But for now, enjoy the video. My daughter is 3 years old and quite verbose. While her language and vocabulary skills are impressive, it's her memory that gets me. Her memory is fantastic. She'll put something of hers away, the teeniest, tiniest thing, and remember a week later just exactly where she put it. Or if I set my glasses down for a bit and then can't find them because my vision is plain awful, she'll remind me that she saw them earlier in a particular room, next to a particular item. Definitely a very keen and aware child. Just last week, she told me, "Mommy, do you remember the time we first got Pearl, our corgi, and she was a baby and you let her ride in my lap all the way home? I like that." She was 18 months when that happened. I had just gotten Pearl and we were in the car headed home. I asked if she wanted to hold the pup while she was buckled into her car seat. Crazy memory skills, right? Okay, so that's for backstory. About a month ago, she asked me if I remembered when she was in my belly. I said, "Of course I remember. You loved to stretch and got hiccups every single day." I laughed and went on about her hiccups and she laughed with me. Suddenly her countenance changed and she looked a little morose. After a moment or two, she asked me a question that rattled me to my core. "Do you remember when I was in your belly and he threw the remote at you? You were very scared." My ex, her biologic father, is a real piece of work. Classic controlling narcissist with a temper. I'd wanted to leave him long before we even conceived. I was about 7 months pregnant at the time, and out of nowhere, he blew up at me and started yelling. I jumped off the couch as quickly as I could and ran behind it, so there would be a barrier between us. He yelled some more and threw the TV remote at my stomach. I swatted it away with my hand, so thankfully it didn't hit me or hurt her in any way. After more yelling on his end, I called a friend, made a go bag, got my keys, and left him. It had been a long time coming, and that was the final straw. My daughter has never been told that story, as it wouldn't be appropriate. I've never talked about it with people in front of her, at any age. Again, not appropriate. That's her father, and as shitty as he is, I refuse to speak negatively about him to her. I will honor and protect the relationship provided it stays healthy. She's never heard of any kind of anything about him that would put him in bad light, and that narcissist would never admit any wrongdoing ever, nor would he ever mention that incident to her. Somehow, she still knows.
First post here. It's short but still creeped me and my wife out. I stayed up late last night, couldn't sleep because I drank coffee late before bed. My wife usually falls asleep way before I do and doesn't wake up to anything. Anyways, I stayed up watching videos and movies, even read a few stories on here. I was back and forth to the kitchen getting snacks and drinks. Finally decided to try and go to bed around 2:30 a.m. I was tossing and turning and I decided I'll take a hot shower. That usually makes me relax. I got out, took a pain pill. I recently had surgeries, so I was kind of hurting. I finally fell asleep around 3:30. My wife gets up around 7:30 to use the restroom and yells, "Babe, the front door is open." I stumble out of bed, I grab my pistol and I head to the living room. I look around and see dim blue light coming in because the sun is beginning to rise and the door is halfway open. I quickly shut it and lock it. I go back to my kids' room and they were both sound asleep. I check the kitchen, bathroom, even the closets. Nothing. I start looking for missing things, keys, consoles, belongings. Everything was still in place. Nothing was missing. I look out the windows. The vehicles were still parked. We never used the front door, ever. It's always deadbolted and locked. I don't even remember the last time we used it. Where our driveway is, it's more convenient to go through the back kitchen door. We never figured it out. I was back and forth through the living room all night and the door was closed. That's the first time that's happened in the 10 years we've been here. Never any crime or break-ins around here. It just really creeped us out.
This is actually my first ever post on Reddit, but I've been dying to get more opinions on what this encounter really was, because the people I've told tend to brush it off as me being paranoid. So, something creepy happened to me. Female, 26, in 2020. This was back when just about everything was closed down during the pandemic. and I was still studying to be a teacher. One of the requirements for teaching is to pass the RICA exam, which is a 4-hour-long test that is commonly taken at a testing center. I found a testing location that was still open and made an appointment. Since COVID regulations were in effect, I was told prior to arriving that test takers could not use the lockers to store their belongings. I don't know, sanitation issues. Anyway, my mom offered to drive me to the test site and said that she would pick me up after to grab lunch. This is important because A, I didn't drive, and B, I decided to leave my phone with my mom because it would be easier with the lockers not being in service. I finished my exam about 10 minutes before the 4-hour time limit ends and went outside to wait for my mom. I expected her to be right outside in the parking lot because she's usually early to arrive to most things, but she wasn't. No big deal. I decided to stand in the middle of the parking space on the opposite side of the lot facing the building. I noticed a man who was dressed in a suit walking into the lot from a path between the testing site and another building that was in the center. He didn't acknowledge me and got into his car that was parked a few spots over to my left. He backed out of his spot and started turning his car in my direction, which was also the opposite direction of the only exit this parking lot had. I knew something was wrong, but before I could start making my way back into the testing site, he blocked the parking spot I was standing in with his car. He had his passenger window rolled down and started to tell me how beautiful my hair was. I said thank you, and he started to say other things, but I couldn't make it out because he began speaking softer. I felt myself taking a step forward naturally to try to make out what he was saying, but stopped because I realized that was probably what he wanted. Me closer to the car. He must have noticed my apprehension because he then began negotiating a friendship, saying he was from Uganda and that he needed someone to show him around. This interaction lasted less than 30 seconds and ended abruptly when out of nowhere he put his car in reverse and dipped out of the parking lot. Not that his car was out of my way, I was able to see that 2 workers from the test site had exited the building at some point and were yelling for me to come inside. They saw the interaction, thought it looked off, and offered that I wait for my mom in the lobby. Has anything like this happened to anyone before? Any men in nice clothes with nice cars saying they are Ugandan with accents to back it up, acting predatory? It really bothers me because young adults frequent these types of testing sites all the time and leave dazed and vulnerable after sitting through 4-hour exams, many times with nothing on them but an ID, like me. Did this man know that, and are there others out there staking out test sites for this reason?
This happened a long time ago at this point, but it still creeps me out. So this happened to me back in 2017. I worked nights and was getting my workout in before I had to go to work that night. My wife and daughter are in the living room and my wife hears someone try to walk into our apartment. Understandably panicked, she quickly gets my attention in the other room. I go to look through my peephole and immediately think it's my little brother, but when I opened the door I realized it was a complete stranger. He had shaggy hair and his eyes were huge. Drugs, maybe? He was wearing a black hoodie with the hood up. He had his hands inside his pocket on the hoodie and it looked almost as if he was clutching something pretty tightly. My gut instinct is strong at this point, and I quickly try to shut the door. As this happens, he tries to insert his foot so that I can't. Luckily, I was quicker and was able to get the door shut and locked. I then booked it to my room and got my gun, still unsure of what this guy had in mind, but by the time I got back, he was nowhere to be found around my apartment. I keep thinking he just had the wrong apartment and maybe he mistook it for someone else's, but then I remember he tried to stop me from shutting my door, combined with how quickly he got out of there. To this day, the thought of what could have happened still creeps me out. Although it goes without saying, I did end up calling in that night.
I was 12 years old in the 6th grade and living in the South. At that time the town's population was around 20,000, but when the local university was in session, it would nearly double. It wasn't a place where everyone inevitably knew everyone else, but if you played 20 questions with each other, you could undoubtedly find people you both knew. My single mother and I lived in an apartment downtown and had been there for around 8 months. It was summertime, and as she worked and attended college, I was usually home alone during the day. It was the early 90s. About halfway through the summer, a girl from my school, Maria, moved into a house about a block away from us. I didn't know Maria that well. and it wasn't until she moved in that I really started spending a lot of time with her. I did not know her parents, and they didn't know my mom. When this event occurred, we had been hanging out for maybe a couple of weeks, riding bikes and going to the library together. Her mother and stepfather worked all day, too, so we were mostly alone. Then, one day, I was at her house when her mom was home. Maria and I were out in the yard when her mom came to the door and hollered at me. She was like, "Hey, did your dad ever manage to find you?" Which to me was super weird, so I was like, "What?" "Yeah," she said. "Your dad called here a couple of days ago and asked if you were at our house. He said he couldn't find you." I was stunned and had no idea what she was talking about. To Maria's mom, a virtual stranger, the call probably made sense. To those who knew me though, it was wild. The actual people who knew me knew that my dad didn't live with me, had never lived with me. In fact, he lived a couple of hours away in a different country at that point in my life. I could count the number of times he had been to my house on one hand. There was no animosity or drama there. He could see me whenever he wanted, but we were not close. He'd never been to the town in which I was living. I hadn't seen him in probably 6 months, and seeing as to how we didn't have a phone, we hadn't recently spoken. He had no idea Maria even existed. He'd never met any of my friends. My mom hadn't even met Maria or her parents. So I was a little freaked out and asked, "Are you sure it was me he was looking for?" She was. "Yes," she said. He'd apparently recited my full name, middle and all, and described me, including my recent haircut and glasses. My dad had never seen my glasses, didn't even know I wore them. I'd only had them for a week. She said he asked if she knew where I was, that he couldn't find me, and she told him to try my apartment. He apparently said, "Okay," and hung up. Well, of course I went straight to my payphone and called my dad as soon as I left. And of course, he had no idea what I was talking about. In fact, it bothered him. To this day, I have no idea what that was about. Was it a prank call or somebody coincidentally looking for their daughter of the same name and physicality, and Maria's mom thought it was me? Or, like, some guy actually trying to abduct or stalk me? But in that case, how did he know to call Maria's house? He would have needed to know Maria's parents' last name for one thing, and her mother had remarried. Her last name was different. And what was the point? I was often alone. I was probably easily abductible at that time. Nothing like that ever happened again. But a few weeks later, I did get a really strange feeling after coming home from the used bookstore. I'd just gotten upstairs and had unlocked my apartment door when something like trepidation hit me with a full force. The living room looked fine. I didn't see or hear anyone, but I got the strongest sense that someone had just been in that room seconds before. When I tried to step forward, every hair on my body stood straight up. I didn't question it, just slammed the door, ran down the stairs, and stayed at the library until my mom got off work. Maria's family moved a few weeks later, but we were there for another year. As far as I know, nothing else happened. I just did a Facebook Live video with my mom about this to see if she remembered anything else. She not only remembered it, but said that she'd gone down and talked to Maria's parents at the time. I didn't know that. Apparently, the guy had also asked if there were any places I might be, like he was fishing for information. The biggest thing, though, is that he asked using my full name. My dad never used that name. He's the only person in the world who calls me by a certain nickname, a shortened version of my longer name. My 11-year-old theorized he was planning on abducting me and called Maria's house posing as my dad, so that when I disappeared my dad would be suspected. He may have known just enough about me to know that my parents were separated, but not enough to understand certain details, like my nickname or my parents' situation. And that's it for today's video. If you liked it, please give a like, please subscribe and share with your friends. Comment down below which one of these stories were your favorite.
And remember, don't trust babies, they're snitches.
What he said.
And snitches get stitches, bitches.
Anyway, if you'd like to support the channel anyway, there are links down below in the description, along with links that you can contact me if you want to share stories of your own that I can read on the channel here. Otherwise, I hope you guys have an amazing week. Bye bye.
It's okay if baby gets snatched as long as it doesn't fucking snitch, because it then deserves to get snatched. You know what I'm saying? Fuck that baby, man. He snatches on his daddy, fucking cheating on his wife. That's fucked up, man. Don't do shit like that. Gotta have your dad's back, you know what I'm saying? Well, not my dad. Fuck him. If he snitched, I mean, if he did anything like that, I'd have snitched on him. Fucking,
You're literally being a hypocrite.
I know. But my dad's an asshole. I'm talking about in
Oh
general.
my god. This interaction lasted less than 30 seconds.
That interaction probably started with, why are you gay? He's from Uganda, come on.
Okay.
That's like the thing for Uganda right now.
Who says I'm gay?
You are gay. You are gay. Imagine he just rolls down his fucking window. Why are you gay?
Oh my god, I pay for that to happen.
Oh yes. That'd be a brilliant conversation starter. Stranger tries forcing himself into my apartment. Just another Tuesday in South Africa. I go to look through my peephole and... I know. It just caught me off guard.
What's funny about the people?
What's not funny about the peephole? Look through my peephole. Anyway.
I decided